So I'm glad the audio is working. I hope the visual is coming through now as well. I've just started sharing my screen. We'll switch a little bit back and forth between a bit of a presentation and the live demo of fynk. So you'll see a bit from both sides here. Again, for those just joining us, again, if you can hear me, you can see everything, then put a little testing, 1, 2, 3 in the chat and let us know where you're joining us from. And we'll give it probably 1 more minute, and then we'll get started. All right, excellent. Well, we're about 2 minutes past the hour, so that should be enough time for anybody held up on another call to join in. So let's get this thing kicked off. Just last bit of housekeeping. I will stay. If you have questions, keep them to the end. That make it easier for me to go back through the chat after and answer them through. I will try and cover as many questions as we can after the call ends or after the main session ends. But again, keep those questions to the end. That'll just make it easier for me to come back to them at the end of the session and answer through in the chat. So where I'd like to start today is just with a quick little pulse check on where you are. So again, in the chat, right, sounds like me. If any of the following statements are true, we've got a couple here. If any of them sound like you, in the chat again, right? Yeah, that's me. Has this ever happened that in your business, a contract with a vendor has auto-renewed because the notice period on that agreement wasn't tracked? It was a vendor that you weren't happy with. They weren't delivering to the extent that you expected to. You wanted to try and switch to a new vendor, or maybe you just didn't need it anymore for whatever reason. Your business needs changed, and so you didn't need that vendor anymore. But by the time you reached out to that vendor to cancel, it was too late. The notice period had already run. You were locked into a renewal, or worse yet, you didn't know and nobody picked up on it until the invoice came in to the accounts payable department. And suddenly there's a question of, why are we paying these people? We're not using that anymore. If that's you, again, in the chat, right? Hey, that's me. Other thing that I've heard a lot, talking to finance leaders, talking to financial analysts at companies, they've had an audit deadline coming up, an important audit. They need to get details about certain contracts to prepare for a supply chain audit or financial audit. And in getting ready to do that, that took a week to get all the data together, wrangle it from different spreadsheets, wrangle it from the documents themselves. And as a result, all the other work, all the other projects that were supposed to be happening in the meantime, whether that was some financial modeling, building out a financial model, that work came to a standstill. Next one, you've got contract data. I mean, just put it this way. How many of you have a spreadsheet where you store in that spreadsheet a list of all of the renewal dates and the values of your vendor contracts? And how many of you don't even have that spreadsheet at all? How many just have the PDF saved? And anytime you need to answer any of those questions, like when is the termination notice date, you need to open up the PDF and read through the whole contract. And then last one, do you ever find sometimes you don't even know what version of a contract is actually effective, right? Happens a little bit more if you're, as many folks are, wearing multiple hats in a finance role, where sometimes legal bleeds into that role. And so you're also doing some of this negotiation with vendors. Documents are going back and forth, and you can't keep track. You're not sure which version is the one that's been signed and effective. So I see, at least to Angela, that some of this is relating. I hope it's not cutting too deep. If any of that is the case, then you're not alone. You are certainly not alone. It's a few different research firms have obviously put out some studies. This one from World TC in particular, they found that a lot of revenue can leak out of issues with contract management, whether it's things like those auto renewals or time that is lost to other more productive projects while people are prepping for audits, for example, or in misunderstanding obligations, missing obligations because of things like that version confusion. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to look at a few steps to help you centralize contracts, identify risks, and speed up the contract process. So you will talk about how we can proactively keep an eye on renewals and different financial commitments. We'll see how fynk can help you stay audit ready 24/7 so that you don't need to have that big audit prep week every time a new audit comes up. I'll see how fynk gets that visibility on contracts and deadlines, right? How does fynk actually read this data? And last, we'll see how fynk can help you better understand the details of these contracts, right? And a quick note here, at the end of the webinar, we'll also send over these slides and the recording of the call for you to review, share with colleagues, etc. So before we jump into a little bit, right, how do we know anything about this, right? What do we know? This is where fynk started. These three guys, they had been working together. They had founded another company previously. That company exited. They stayed with it for a little while, decided they wanted to try something new. And they were thinking back to their time running this previous company. And they always found such a pain to deal with contracts. They even had one case when they were running that last company where they had missed a deadline on a key client contract, and it almost cost them that client. And in that case, that was tens of thousands of euro that they nearly lost. Thankfully, the client was understanding and they were able to come to an accommodation. But in that case, nearly tens of thousands of euro lost because of a missed date in a contract. So they set out to build fynk. That's where we are about 3-4 years ago now. Time does fly. And fast forward to, again, even this last summer, where we are now, continuing to grow, servicing well over 300 customers now across Europe, particularly in the German-speaking region, but growing across Europe and across the world. And speaking of a few of those customers, some logos you might recognize across hospitality, industry, manufacturing, a couple sports teams, a lot of trusted names that many of you know. So as we talked about a minute ago, right? A few of you said it yourself. You're still tracking contracts with Excel and with things like shared drives. And it's crazy to think, right, that back in the day, right, go back the year I was born, you'd see this is what a contract tracker looked like. It was an Excel spreadsheet. And we come forward to today, and again, it's still a spreadsheet. And the interface has gotten a little nicer. We've gotten a little bit colorful. We've certainly added a lot of really exciting and powerful computational tools, right? I mean, you're finance people. You are rightfully doing a lot of really complicated financial modeling of your businesses in Excel, because that's what it's designed for. But it is not designed also to be tracking and storing different data points to look up and remind you about things, right? So when we're doing this, when we're manually inputting this data into spreadsheets, that's just how we end up with those unintended renewals. This is how we end up with spending weeks at a time to prep for an audit. This is how we end up having data that's hiding out in the PDF because there's just so much in that document to extract. We can't do it all manually. And this is only that pressure to be audit ready, that pressure to stay on top of the agreements. That's only growing with regulatory pressure, right? The EU is constantly implementing new supply chain and operational resilience requirements. particularly in areas like manufacturing, in some regulated industries like banking and in medicine. Those are mandating heavy documentation across all vendors, even vendors that you wouldn't really think of as, important supply chain risks. And as suppliers grow, regulations grow, risk increases. And so that additional risk of not having visibility, not being confident that you know where all of the documentation is for these different agreements, that increases that risk. Thankfully, luckily for you, AI has come in and is able to well equipped and well designed to make this work better, right? If you think back to what was it, 2-3 years ago now, when ChatGPT first launched, everybody was really excited because it was able to do things freely with text, and that's all contracts are. Contracts are big blocks of text. So they're perfectly designed. It's as if contracts were designed for AI to be able to process and understand them well and understand them really effectively. And so that's where AI is really powerful and able to really make use of the data there and prepare it for you in a way that you can stay ahead of things, that you can stay on top of these renewals, stay on top of these dates, stay on top of these audits. So that's enough of me yapping about what the situation in the past has been. Let's see what it looks like in practice if you're new to a solution like fynk and get up and running using AI to stay on top of these things. So our first piece, right? Staying on top of renewals and financial commitments. And we will jump over to the demo side now. So this is fynk. This is what we're looking at day to day. And when you log into fynk, you'll see that we've got these sorts of dashboards pulling in data across all of the different contracts to help you identify, right? What are our commitments? What are our payment terms commitments, for example, right? And you see our highest, our lowest, and our median, right? This can help us understand what are we typically agreeing to, what are our exceptional cases, right? Similar things on in the IT space, things like guaranteed availability, right? What kind of service levels are our vendors promising us? What are they actually delivering? And how does that compare to the other vendors we have? And most importantly, if we scroll down to our calendar, we can see what are the dates that we need to keep an eye on, right? And so we look at this month for April, we'll see that what was that, Tuesday? We had a date here for the notice period. So that notice period has just passed for this purchase agreement. And we see that the renewal date for that's connected to that one is coming up here in just a week from today. And there's also another contract as its end date coming up the day after, right? So with fynk, we've taken these contracts, we've gotten all those details out, and we split them into digestible views, like, for example, this calendar and the list, the other dashboard widgets here as well. And these dates are nice. These dates are great, but you don't want to have to check the calendar to find that out. And fynk doesn't make you, because we also send you these notifications. So, for example, if I go into my notifications, I see on all those documents we just saw in the calendar, we have notifications, right? This one was about to renew. This one was about to expire. This one's about to enter its notice period. And you'll notice the timing as well on these. So 18 days ago, 8 days ago, 7 days ago. These dates are all still in the future. This 7 days ago, 8 days ago. But fynk sends you the notification ahead of time, because you don't want to just remember on the day that you need to make a decision. That's still good to you. If Sai walked up to you today and said, "Hey, one of your vendor agreements, you have to today is your last day to cancel this," that's not helpful information for you, because it's going to take you more than what do we got left? 11 hours in the day. It's going to take you more time than that to decide, make an informed decision about what you should do with that vendor, right? So with that, Fink's always sending you these reminders in advance to give you that time to make a decision. And with that, this is how Fynk helps you remember proactively stay on top of these renewals and keep clear on your various financial commitments. So again, right? Your obligations are always in view. You can get them to click of a button. The reminders come through, and everything is filtered by. It is able to break down by different attributes of the agreement. So speaking of that kind of filtering, looking at how do we report on different agreements, one key piece of reporting is being able to stay audit ready, right? Whether that's, again, a supply chain audit, some sort of compliance audit, maybe you're doing an internal audit, right? Somebody from leadership has asked you, because they get some sort of notion about something they want to change in the business. An incident happens with an IT vendor and they say, hey, we need to avoid any future incidents happening like this with other vendors. So I need a report of any vendors where our service levels are below a certain threshold so that we can identify that risk and move forward. Thankfully, Fynk is there to support you in this audit readiness with our customizable document lists. So again, jumping back in, and we'll see here, we're looking at one of these such lists. So what we're seeing here, if we look around the top, we're looking at vendor agreements with an end date after this month. So vendor agreements, they're expiring soon, and they have some sort of recurring value. We'll see exactly what that is here in the list, but upcoming vendor renewals or end dates, active ones, which have some sort of recurring value, right? So we see in this list, we've just got 5 contracts that meet these filters, and we're able to see exactly the key data that we need that's relevant for these agreements. So on a service, on some sort of vendor subscription, the value of the contract is going to be important. The cancellation notice date is going to be important if we have one. And we see in this case, one of these, we don't have one. The contract term is going to be important, right? And it'll also be important to understand what they are, because some of these subscriptions, they're not a SaaS subscription. One of them is about our office janitorial and cleaning service. One of them's something to do with our paper supplies in the office. With that, with these lists, Fynk is able to show, again, the key details. And we can switch around to find other quick reports. So say, for example, we've got a request from leadership that they want to see, and that example I mentioned a minute ago, they want to know about what vendors have us promised below a certain threshold on their guaranteed uptime. We can jump into our filters and pull in exactly that. So I'm going to say vendors where it is at a maximum of 99.8. And we'll clear out a couple of those other filters. So we can say, just want the vendor ones. And I want to also show the guaranteed availability if I'm able to spell it. Got it wrong in the practice runs too. So as you can see, I didn't count the clicks, less than 5 clicks probably. We've taken this report on vendor details around our vendor subscriptions, and we've been able to switch it up to answer that question from a CTO, a CEO, about what vendors are promising below a certain threshold of a service level. And now they have the ability to go say, okay, I need to go reach out to that vendor to make sure that we can mitigate that risk somehow. And I'd be remiss not to mention, right, while some of these reports are obviously going to be ad hoc, right? That example of the one where the CTO is asking to identify this based off of some incident that just happened. There are other ones, other reports that you're going to be running on a regular basis. And fynk also stores those for you uh, so that you can come back to them quickly and repeatedly. Whether that's something like which customers let us use their logo publicly, or show us all of our customer license agreements, or maybe we'll jump over to a legal team view that they're using. In each case, fynk is storing these quick references, and in every view, you only see the relevant data for that particular case. So again, in summary, with fynk, all the contracts are stored in a way that you can easily conduct these audits, right? You've got a view on what are the data points, and within each contract, you can also see specific history of it, right? What's changed, who's been signed, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we didn't look specifically at the access piece here, but it goes without saying that fynk, your data security internally and externally, is of critical importance to us. And so only the folks who need to see those agreements, see certain agreements, are going to see those agreements. Again, as somebody working in finance, generally, you're going to have a view on every agreement that is involving money going out or money going in of the company, which is usually most agreements. But for those other departments that you work with, for HR, for sales, for different departments that are doing purchasing, right? Whether it's marketing, purchasing something, operations, purchasing something, you also have the ability to hide those contracts and only show them to the specific department owner. And if we need to do any further manipulation of this data, you can also export all of that into an Excel sheet for further processing. So that's how we at fynk look at keeping you audit ready and audit prepared. But and one of those cases, we want to talk about a customer of ours who really found that audit proofness important. In this case, at 514, they'd run into some issues where they had an actual loss, a pretty significant one, because of something they missed in the contract. So, of course, they're happy now leveraging some of the other capabilities in fynk to prevent those sort of things from slipping through the cracks. But after that happened, as I mentioned, right, events in the business will lead to you trying to run these reports and make sure that you can identify where you might have that risk in other places again. And that's exactly what Harold has found with fynk. So the next step here, gaining visibility across these deadlines, these contracts and deadlines. In other words, right, all of those data points, everything, all that data we were looking at, the nice spreadsheet, the nice dashboard, that list, those reports, those reminders that got sent out, those are all really fun and exciting. But you don't want to have to read the whole contract to type in all of that data. And maybe in the past, some of you might have explored with solutions in this area before, tried another contracting tool, or maybe you have that spreadsheet and you know the pain of filling in that spreadsheet and just how time consuming that can be. The most important thing for you to know coming away from today is you don't need to do that yourself anymore. Not with fynk. Because with fynk, whenever you upload a new contract, our AI will scan it and find all of the critical details that you need and save them directly into our database. So you don't need to be going through reading it yourself, manually doing that lookup. We've got it covered for you. It doesn't matter either how old the contract is. As you can see, we can go back if it is scanned and uploaded, even if in this case, we're going all the way back to 1910, fynk is able to handle and read contracts like these. So again, I used to say that the oldest contract that you have is one that we can read because we can read this one. But I did have a customer last week tell me that they have contracts going back to 1906. So unfortunately, the oldest contract I've seen is not this sample one that I have, but we do have a customer with an even older one. But again, since they're able to scan it, digitize it, turn it into a PDF and upload it, fynk is able to read that document and find, okay, what's the date? What are the end dates? What's the value of the agreement? And in this case, how are we billing it? We're billing it on a fixed fee. And as you see, as I click around here within these options, fynk is jumping around to these different sections of the document and putting it these blue box. Because while our AI is highly, highly, highly accurate, I don't want to spend too much time talking about the accuracy because the only way to see it for yourself is really to try fynk and find out. But while our AI is highly accurate, it's also always going to give you a citation. It will always cite the source. It'll always show you where we got the information from so that you can verify if you need, you can audit, or just get more context, right? Sometimes, obviously, contract values are quite quite cut and dry, but sometimes there's more context, and that's how fynk will get you that info. So again, just to recap, right? With any contract, anything that you upload, if it's a PDF, if it's a Word document, you upload it into fynk, we will scan it, we will look through the data, we won't make you read through the whole text of the contract and type in that data one by one, and probably make some typos, make some mistakes, because if you've been reading that many contracts, your eyes might start to glaze over, because when you're typing things in manually, you're liable to make a typo, to fat finger something, to hit the wrong key. Thankfully, fynk's AI doesn't have any of those human fallibilities. And so we're able to get these details saved, which is what powers the dashboard, what powers that report, that document list that we saw earlier. So again, just to recap, right? We think the contracts, they're all living in one place. They're living here in fynk. They're living in your database. They're not scattered across emails. They're not scattered across different drives. They're all just here, right? And when you put them into fynk, when you bring them in, we find the data for you. Then going back, right? Once we've got that data in, that is what powers the reminders. We saw earlier, that is what powers the dashboards, helps you make sure that you don't miss these deadlines, make sure that you can address things proactively, looking in the calendar, for example, rather than reactively. Talking about this, right? Another example of a customer who's really found this AI look through helpful and really brought some leverage into their business, right? Fiscally, there's a company, they've got thousands of contracts across their vendors, across their customers. They're operating, I can't keep up, frankly, with the number of countries that they're expanding to. They're, like us, are a startup based here in Vienna. And they really struggled always just with the volume of contracts, getting to key details about those agreements quickly. And by centralizing them, by having that data searchable from the AI, we're really able to solve this for them. And it's brought a big impact to Fiscally's business, as you can hear from Lucas. So the last piece here, obviously it's fun and it's great and it's lovely that fynk can pull direct quotes, direct details from an agreement. But sometimes there are some other pieces. There's more nuance, there's detailed points. You want to ask some free-form questions. And now, new development here in fynk, just new since the beginning of this year, you can. So with every fynk document, we have this free-form chat where we can ask questions to fynk's AI to better understand a specific agreement. So I'll put this out to you in the audience. I've had a little bit of a chat before with this conversation before, but first good question we see in the chat. Right, this is a sales contract between fynk or between Trekt, which is a fictitious company, and Datadog. They're a software analytics provider. So you've got a big agreement with a large software vendor. What's a question that you would like to ask and just kind of understand a bit better in the chat? If you have a sample question you'd like to ask, drop it into the meeting chat, and then I will ask it directly to fynk's AI chat. So you can see it working here in real time. Right? Drop something in the chat here. Otherwise, we can see, scroll up and down some of the questions we've already asked to fynk's AI ahead of time before, right? We can see, look at the contract value, understand what indemnities we have. But any questions from the audience? Anything you'd like me to ask directly? Okay, I see. We had one. Sorry, it came through. It went to the hosts and panels, and it didn't come to everyone. But we had somebody who wanted to understand better the liability under force majeure. So I'll say, what can you tell me about the force majeure clause? I hope I spelled force majeure right. So we put that in a fynk. And I mean, you saw the speed of this answer here, right? The agreement contains a force majeure. It says we're not liable for a delay. And whichever party must use only commercially reasonable efforts to do things as soon as possible. So we do have some ambiguity. And of course, like all other things in fynk, when we're working with our AI, we have a citation. We have references to the document, to the original content to get that answer. So, and so you can see, you can ask fynk free-form questions to better understand a document. And I mean, the speed that actually I am still surprised sometimes by just how quickly the AI can answer these sorts of questions. Now, we've got that free-form chat, but there are also some other questions, particularly when you're reviewing a contract before it comes in and is signed. You want to make sure that it's going to follow certain rules that you have in your business, especially around things like payment terms, governing law, right, to minimize risk. And that's where, again, another place where fynk's AI is able to help. With these playbooks, we can define specific rules for a contract, and fynk will determine whether or not the contract follows that rule and give a recommendation. So in this case, you see, we've got some different rules. We've got a rule about the payment terms, and fynk has said, yes, this agreement does follow our rule for the payment terms on a document. And again, giving us the citation, we can see what our own rule is, net 45 or shorter. And we see here that net 30 is shorter than net 45. But we can also see that it's breaking some other rule that we have. In this case, that we want it to be covered by California or Delaware law, but this one is covered by New York. Again, fynk is able to find that, understand it, interpret it, and give that decision. In this case, the document should be reviewed. So, as you see, right, when we're trying to better understand contracts, go beyond just the headline details that we can put into reports, that we can put into dashboards. If we want to go a little bit deeper to better understand those risks, better understand those obligations, fynk is able to support this too, through chatting directly with the document, being able to ask those sort of one-to-one questions, get quick answers, and also by making sure that when we're reviewing something before we sign it, we can set up the specific rules and make sure that we're going to follow those rules and flag where there's a deviation. So of these steps we've seen today, right? What would you like to implement? What we've seen, right? So we've seen how fynk helps managing renewals and commitments. We've seen how fynk helps with audit readiness. We've seen how fynk can automate that process of storing the data, understanding the data, identifying, extracting the data. And we've seen how fynk helps us dive deeper into the text of the agreements. So tell me in the chat here, which of these steps would you like to get started with first? What of these excites you the most? What do you want to learn more about? Let us know in the chat here. Again, those options, right? Managing renewals, managing those commitments, staying audit ready, automating that process of extracting the data points, and diving deeper into the details of these agreements. Okay. And folks, make sure we're putting these answers in the chat and put them to the hosts, and put it to everyone, not just to the host and panelists, right? Excellent, Alex. 1 to 4, we want to see everything. Want to see everything, Alex? Awesome, awesome, awesome. Yeah, 1 to 3, right? Awesome, Judith. 1 to 3. Yeah, excited to have you, Judith, for those working with Judith already to get started on some other processes within her team. So great to have you here, Judith, and excited to jump in with these pieces as well when we've got the chance. All right. So a few FAQs before we wrap up and start to take your questions. This is also your invitation now. We're through the demo portion. If you have questions that you'd like to see answered, put them into the chat now. Again, we'll get to them after we've talked through some of the FAQs and share some info about a special offer for you. But for now, if you have questions that have been stewing in the back of your mind, now is a great time to put them into the chat so I can get to them once we've kind of stepped through these FAQs and talked about the offer for you today, right? So something we hear about a lot, right? Implementing a new system takes a lot of time, just can't fit it in right now. Especially hear this from teams who have set up a new tool before, that have teams that have kind of gone through the work of uploading their contracts all somewhere and then found that it still took them a lot of time to plug in all the data manually, and that's not something they have right now. So again, the first thing I'd say is, look, I can tell you all day long that fynk's fynk's AI, our ability to get accurate details out of those contracts, it's great that our accuracy is off the charts, but you need to see it for yourself. And so we do offer a free 14-day trial period to where you can test the software. You can see for yourself, upload your real contracts and see how fynk is doing understanding that data, how fynk is doing getting those data points out of the agreement. Seeing is a believing, and I recommend that you all do go forward with that step and see just how good that extraction is. But for context, the other piece, right? If we're looking at just this use case of uploading contracts, storing the agreements, storing your contract backlog, and building these sorts of reports, this is something that start to finish can run typically between 2 to 4 weeks. The big variables, the two things that can affect that sort of timeline, the first is what data points you need to track, how many data points you need to track, how complex those data points are that need to be tracked. One of the pieces of this setup process is I'll support you on, if you have custom ones that are not in fynk by default, support you on how to create those and how to tune the AI to identify those correctly. If you have more of those, that could take a bit more time. The more important variable, how long it takes to get set it up with fynk though, is the number of contracts you have to upload and how clear of a view you have of them today, how consistently they are stored. Uh, I've had customers where they have all of their agreements stored in one, stored in a SharePoint, stored in a Google Drive, and that upload goes fairly quickly. If you're in a situation right now where you have some of your contracts on your computer and some other colleagues have some that are stored in emails, that is often where the implementation tends to drag on because unfortunately, and I don't think we haven't figured out a good way to do this. I don't think anybody has figured out a good way to do this. That's moving to fynk and setting up that process, implementing that process in your business so that fynk is where contracts are stored is the solution. But up until that point, before that point, there really is no good workaround for centralizing the contracts until they're centralized. So that's the other factor that can really push out onboarding timelines, and that can push things out well beyond 4 weeks in certain cases, unfortunately. The other piece to know, right, with customers in the outside of the German speaking region. So again, I am a solution consultant in fynk. I work with teams both in evaluating if fynk is the right fit for them, and if it is, going forward and getting set up. So for customers who do not speak German as their first or preferred language, I will be the one leading that onboarding as well as leading your evaluation. You don't have to spend time explaining to somebody, one person through the sales process, everything that's going on in your business and why I think might be a right fit, and then explain it again to somebody brand new to get you set up. In the English speaking or outside of the German speaking region, that is all me. It's just me. And we'll look at the math here in a minute, but depending on your contract volumes, some teams have seen really upwards of 50 hours just on months saved on that process of reading the contract text, finding those details. Now, talking about this, for example, right? This varies heavily, of course, with the number of contracts you have for a month and how much time it takes you to scan those. But if we assume 2 hours per contract to scan, find those details, and 50 for a month, if we're putting somebody on that task who's paid 60 an hour, then even when we add the fynk costs, we're still saving a few thousand a month in time. Now, of course, many of the time you are saving. Those salary costs are baked in, but that's the opportunity cost. That's the cost that you could be spending putting those people to work on other more productive projects. And the other question that comes up a lot, right, particularly coming from the finance team, living here in Europe, right? fynk is fully hosted in the EU, fully compliant with all the regulations of GDPR. All documents are end-to-end encrypted, right? We support two-factor authentication. We support single sign-on for those companies that have it. And we have all the rights management and the audit logs in place to keep track of, not just to make sure that only the right people can see the data, and let you triple check who's actually been looking at the data. Going beyond that, though, we also are certified under ISO 27001 for our data management processes there. That's kind of the gold standard for information security. And so we have been certified, our practices are certified under that standard as well. And we're compliant with DORA, with the EU's DORA regulations around data privacy. So talk to us. You have two options now. Hopefully you've learned a few things today about kind of generally structuring agreements or kind of structuring how you store agreements. Think about what pieces to keep track of, what dates to look for. But you can decide to stay as you are, keep the current processes that you have in place. Or we can try option 2, and we can work with you together to implement fynk and get you in the place where you're monitoring fynk is monitoring those deadlines for you. Sorry, you're not monitoring the deadlines because fynk is doing that for you. You're getting proactive alerts to stay ahead of renewals. You've got audit trails, and you can really visualize and call out key risks ahead of time. So to support you for doing that, to thank you for joining today's webinar, we have an offer specifically to that. I mentioned that I'll be your onboarding and setup guide. Normally, this onboarding and setup ranges around €2,000 for the initial setup, and with our business plan. If you get started with us in the next month, deadline is May 15th, right? But mention the code webinar, and the onboarding and setup will be free. As a thank you for joining us today and learning more about fynk. As I mentioned, though, deadline is May 15th. So this was a little bit of the push and pull. We agreed with my boss. They said, hey, you've got some vacation coming up. So you can let people get started, but it's got to be before you go away on holiday. So I decided to get started with us before May 15th, and the onboarding, that setup will be free. So that's us today. That's what you've heard me say a lot about fynk. The only other thing I would suggest is don't just take it from me, take it from our customers as well. You can see our reviews over on G2, on Capterra, on OMR if you're in the German-speaking region. Check out also, there's a few case studies on our website. You've heard from 514, you've heard from Fiscally, but you can see stories from a few other satisfied customers as well on our website there, and hear from their perspective what fynk has been able to do for them. So thank you all for joining today. That is the end of the planned portion of today's session. We've got 12 minutes left to tackle any questions that you have. So if you do have further questions here, you can put them in the chat. If you'd like to move forward, if you'd like to take advantage of this pre-onboarding offer and learn a little bit more about fynk, dive into the details of what this could look like for your team specifically, you can scan the QR code or go to that link in the page. I'll also drop that link in the chat to book some time with us. But that's all for today. If you don't have any questions, again, we're really great to have you. Appreciate you joining us today, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.